all. My name is Ravishankar Borgaonkar. I'm a senior research scientist at Sintef Digital and also associate professor at University of Stavanger in Norway. My co-colleague, co-speaker is Altaf Shaik. He is a senior researcher at TU Berlin, Norway. Our talk title is 5G IMSI catches Mirage. With today's talk, we hope to answer you a question whether the IMSI catches problem has been completely addressed in 5G mobile networks or not. So before we proceed further, let's try to cover the background of some IMSI catches. So IMSI catches, they can also be referred as Stingrays or fake base stations. They basically are fake devices which try to simulate a part or a complete cellular networks so that they can identify or track their target, that is basically a mobile phone devices, which are in the range of the fake base stations. They can be also used for interception of mobile user data or radio signaling data that includes the metadata that can be linked to the targeted mobile phone device. In addition, these devices can also be used for battery drain attacks or denial of service attack or kill switch or downgrading to lower generation. But this is out of scope, at least for today's talk. And of course, IMSI catches are silently affects mobile user privacy. Today, we will only address about identification and tracking of mobile phone device with 5G IMSI catches. And there are two types of IMSI catcher. One is called passive and another is active. So in passive attacks, basically IMSI catchers are trying to eavesdrop the communication between mobile phone and the network. And these are very difficult to detect because they never interact with mobile phones or network. Whereas active type of IMSI catchers are more powerful because they can control the mobile phones. They can force them to interact with the way they want, similar like a master-slave architecture. And they can be detected technically, so there may be a signature to detect them, but it's almost impossible to detect on commercial IMSI catcher, commercial mobile phone device, which is also out of scope for this talk. So we will cover it later sometime on a separate talk on this matter. And let's try to look at the 4G networks and how 4G IMSI catchers work before we move towards the 5G one. So imagine that this is the radio access network, which consists of a mobile phone and the base station we call node B in the 4G, and this is basically connected with the core network. Imagine that Alice went to a shop, he bought a SIM card, which basically has to put in the mobile phone, you power on the mobile phone, it attaches to the network. And then basically using this setup, the Alice can make a phone call with the Bob. And basically in this scenario, then comes the IMSI catcher. And what it does basically, it exploits the weaknesses in the procedures of when the mobile phone is being attached to the network, which is we call device attach. Once it's attached, it has to authenticate with mobile network, whether it has money to pay or make a call. So there has to be paging procedures when the Alice receives a call. And these are the three technical procedures which usually being exploited by IMSI catchers also in 4G networks. And the identities which can try to steal basically is called IMSI, which is attached to your SIM card. It could be also IMEI, which is the identifier for your mobile phone device. And also there could be some other identities which can be linked to Alice in this case, for example. And this is what the IMSI catchers is doing here. And now before we move towards the 5G IMSI catchers, we try to see what has been new additions in the security, in the RAN security of 5G networks. And we will try to look. So 5G networks, we'll just briefly go. It has been started to deploy all over the world. It has ultra high speed, ultra low latency, all the technical features of 5G. But also it has more security features than the 4G network. So definitely this is much better than what we have in today's 4G network. Now, also there are two types of 4G deployment types. So billions of devices, what we have as of 2021, so we have a 5G and 4G towers combination of, and these towers are basically connected to 4G core network. This type of network we call as a non-standalone mode. Then in somewhere in future, hopefully in a couple of years, we may have another architecture which is called 5G towers, and these will be connected to a brand new 5G core network which has been transformed for 4G core networks. And this type of networks we call a standalone mode. Of course, there are different features of two different networks, but this is just to give impression. We will have a two radio network, one is for non-standalone mode and one for standalone mode we try to focus. And the 5G security architecture has been improved a lot. Now there are so many jargons were difficult to go through each block in this presentation. But we try to stick with the radio access network in a 5G, and that radio access network basically this red block what you see here, and we try to only focus on the SIM card, which basically it could be a 4G or it could be a brand new 5G SIM card, and the 5G phones which are available in the market, and basically they will be connected to G Node B, that's the next generation Node B, which is called in 5G, and that will be connected to core network. But we focus on the RAN component, how the mobile phone and the base station interact with each other, and we just try to focus on this way. So what are the new identities has been added? So let's look at some security features of 5G. So basically, there is a new SUPI which is called Subscription Permanent Identifier, which is equivalent of IMSI in 4G. And this SUPI has been protected. So it means that over the radio interface, it will be protected. It will be protected using home network public keys that will be encrypt your SUPI here. And encrypted SUPI is basically recognized as a SUKI. We also refer to this as a SUSHI for authentication procedures. And this SUPI, the intention is never transmit this SUPI in a plain text to the network. And unless you are using legacy networks, basically you are downgrading to 4G, or you are using null scheme in 5G where you don't want it to use encryption mechanism, and you basically use this one. Another feature is that with the SUPI, so the network will never page a mobile phone using SUPI. So that has been protected, that has been avoided, so that IMSI catchers will not get SUPI at all during the paging process. So that's a good improvement. And basically the benefits of this thing is that if the IMSI catcher is acting as a passive or active mode, it's difficult to eavesdrop on SUPI because it never transmitted over the network. And also it's difficult to probe as an active IMSI catchers to get the SUPI from the mobile phone, because mobile phone will not give the SUPI, because instead it will give you the SUSHI, which will difficult to link with the target, for example. And the combination of this SUPI and SUKI looks like this. So SUSHI means Subscription as Concealed Identifier, which is called SUSHI, and this uses public key. So representation is kind of looking like this. So SUPI consists of MCC, MNC, and MSIN. To convert SUKI, so basically it uses the encryption algorithm ECIES, or it could be a proprietary algorithm, which receives the input as a home network public key. And this can be used to encrypt the MSIN part of your SUPI. So basically MCC, MNC will be plain text in SUSHI, and green will be encrypted, which is MSIN. Now I will hand over my next part to my colleague, Altaf. And he will take you to the next REST features.
I would like to begin by presenting you the security features that have been introduced in the 5G specifications, and followed by our research and experimental findings that we have been doing over the last 3 to 4 months on the 5G NSA networks. To start with, I would take the paging procedure. The 5G paging procedure has been drastically improved compared to the LTE paging procedure. Paging is nothing but an activity that is carried out by the core network before actually delivering the call or a data message. In the past, researchers have demonstrated that it's possible to track the location of a user by basically observing the paging messages over a period of time and trying to link the temporary identifiers to the users. And this way, they were able to calculate precise location of the user, which has been demonstrated on 2G and also 4G networks as well. But now, with various security improvements, the 5G paging procedure is pretty strong. In terms of, for example, let's say the paging occasion that used to be calculated based on the IMSI, which is a permanent identifier, which is directly linked to the SIM card, is now being replaced to calculating the paging occasion by using only STMC. And second, as we see that normally paging messages contain either a temporary identifier, or in certain cases, well, we could also call like the abnormal cases, they might contain the IMSI. But now in 5G, it's mandatory that the paging messages should only contain the temporary identifiers, such as the STMC or the radio network temporary identifier. And moving on, not only the temporary identifier is used for the paging, but now the core network is also responsible for refreshing the temporary identifier. Of course, like this refreshing was also existing in 4G, but now it has been made mandatory in the specifications that the core network entity, for example, in case of 5G, it's the AMF, that is not only responsible for assigning the temporary identifier, but it should also like keep track of updating or refreshing the temporary identifier sufficiently. It has been proven in 4G that the network configurations were designed in such a way that the temporary identifier, you can also call it GUTI, that remained the same, unchanged, for over a period of even more than 10 days, or even in certain cases like months, because the mobile device has not changed its location. And now in 5G, the temporary identifier would be a short-term identifier that is sufficiently refreshed and sufficiently randomized. This way, you increase the privacy of a 5G user with respect to passive attacks or even active attacks as well. And now the GUTI is in 4G, but like it's the same similar terminology, which is a 5G GUTI. Here, there's a screenshot from the specification which says that the 5G GUTI, the temporary identifier, will be assigned to the mobile device during the registration procedure, and after that, it is the responsibility of the network to update this temporary identifier. There are various occasions, such as whenever a paging message is delivered to the mobile device, during that procedure, there is already an existing signaling connection which could be reused to update that particular temporary identifier. This way, the privacy of the 5G user would be drastically enhanced compared to what it was in 4G or even 2G networks. Moving on to the anti-bidding down between architectures parameter. Normally, in any communication architecture, it's the client that actually, provides the security algorithms to the server, and the server actually decides which of the security algorithms to be chosen. So the same approach also goes in mobile networks, where the mobile phone provides the list of security algorithms, and the core network actually decides which is the best algorithm to be chosen. There are classic attacks are operated by IMSI catchers in this particular issue, but now 5G networks will actually overcome this by using the anti-bidding down between architectures parameter, which is a parameter that actually carries the list of security features that are actually supported by the core network. Now the mobile device is also aware of what kind of security features are actually enabled in the core network that it is currently connected to. In this way, the classic bidding down attacks, where the server, or you can also call the network, lies about its security features and downgrades the mobile device to use a less secure or let's say weaker encryption algorithms. Such type of attacks can be actually avoided by using the ABBA parameter. And as you see that this is sent in an NSA Security mode command, which is already a security protected message. So the man in the middle cannot actually tamper with such messages. If you have been following LTE research over the last two to 3 years, you must have come across the Altaf attack. So Altaf attack is basically due to the lack of integrity protection on the user plane traffic in LTE networks, a man in the middle can actually identify the encrypted DNS packets and try to hijack the DNS session, thereby hijacking the whole data session. But now, this has been overcome in 5G networks by introducing integrity protection also for the user plane. There is already integrity protection, mandatory integrity protection for the control plane, but now there is integrity protection also introduced for the user plane traffic. However, this is not a mandatory feature and is optional to use depending on the operator's policies. In the past, we have demonstrated that when a mobile device communicates its capabilities to the core network, we have noticed that there has been some kind of misconfigurations in the network. Due to those misconfigurations, a man in the middle can actually modify these capabilities, and which actually causes various denial of service attacks or even downgrading of the user to a less secure network. This is the reason because the capabilities are actually exchanged prior to establishing a security context, which actually allows the man in the middle to modify the capabilities and take advantage of or exploit the particular situation. But now in 5G, this has been mandated that the capabilities should only be exchanged after having a secure establishment session. It is the first time that IMSI catcher detection has been considered in the specifications, or I would say entered into specifications. If you look at the security specifications 33.501 and in Annex E, there is a mechanism that has been defined to where UV-assisted network-based IMSI catcher detection mechanism is defined and could be used by the networks. Normally, in a normal call procedure or during a call transaction or a data transaction, mobile phones usually send measurement reports to the core network. These measurement reports usually contain the signal strength or whatever the radio information that a mobile phone can actually see at that particular instant. For instance, cell identifiers or the base station identifiers, the frequencies, the signal strengths, all this information can be actually sent from using measurement reports. So now the core network can actually use that information in a systematic approach and try to identify for inconsistent cell identifiers or unknown frequencies and try to differentiate between genuine and fake base stations. Although this is not a bulletproof approach, I would say, but it's a pretty good start to actually implement such mechanisms into the mobile networks. These have been always on the paper, but we never saw them actually happening in the specifications. But now, operators can actually take lead to implement such features and such mechanisms, and can actually get rid of, or let's say, detect base stations or fake base stations. This is a summary of all the security features I've discussed until now. And as you see that the current 5G NSA networks only support the secure UV capability transfer, and the rest of the security features are only available in the 5G standalone networks, which are yet to come in the next years. Now let's talk about 5G IMSI catches in the NSA mode. As you have seen the security features that the IMSI, which is one of the most important identifier or let's say privacy identifier in this whole mobile network business, is not encrypted and is usually exposed over the air. And also due to the lack of any mandatory regulations to frequently update or to sufficiently update the random identifiers, we might still see some kind of tracking attacks happening in 5G NSA networks as well. And now I would like to show you a video where we actually operate our own 5G NSA test network and try to register one of our test devices to that. So as you see that we have already started the test network, which is using a 5G NR base station, but the background is a 4G core network. As you see now, the mobile phone has actually identified a 5G or a 5G NSA network, and it would immediately connect to this 5G NSA network. And on the right side, we have our logs where we actually log whichever device is connecting. And as you see on the left side here, the device has actually registered to the network. And now we should be able to see that this device, the information about the device, such as its IMSI and IMEI, being extracted to our internal logs, I would say. And this is performed using one of our test devices. And to explain more about the security features that we have been testing in 5G NSA networks over the last 3 to 4 months, we have tested up to 4 NSA networks in 2 different countries. And now let's take a look at what kind of security features are active at the moment, what have been changed in the past, and how operators have updated their configurations, considering various attack demonstrations and responsible disclosures over the past. First, I would start with tracking with GUTI. In 2015, we have done various experiments trying to identify the configuration policies of GUTIs in various operator networks. So basically what we do is here, we try to register and deregister the device across various time instants and try to note what kind of random identifier has been assigned to that particular mobile device. As you see here in 2015, the identifiers rarely change. As you see that there's only 1 digit change compared to the previous one. And this is a pretty bad configuration policy. And now when we compare it with what the network is actually assigning in 2021, we see there is a sufficient randomization in the GUTIs, which in the first place eliminates tracking in 5G NSA networks. And we also done similar experiments in the 5G NSA networks as well. As you see on the right side, the identifiers sufficiently change, although the beginning DD remains to be same. But however, like it changes after a couple of hours or the next day. But at least I would say this is sufficiently randomized and has been updated periodically. Moving to another operator, we don't observe the same level of randomness because the GUTI tends to remain the same for several days and it updates after several days. In such configuration policies are a bad practice, and this actually allows tracking of GUTIs or let's say linking a random identifier to a particular subscriber. And with operator 3, it doesn't get better because we see that the GUTI do not change at all, even for 10 plus days, even after we have restarted the device multiple times. These are pretty bad configurations that we have been identified in 5G NSA networks. One last thing about the tracking, but by sufficiently or frequently randomizing the temporary identifiers, in the first place, you can actually avoid several attacks. But this requires like some changes in the internal policies and timers to activate that. Also, there are several mechanisms available in the specifications that could be invoked to randomly or to frequently change the temporary identifiers, such as the periodic PAU, or let's say periodic routing area update, or a GUTI reallocation command. This could be periodically like invoked to update the identifiers. But in practice, in our logs, we actually don't observe these commands being sent to the mobile devices, which is still I don't understand. Like it's still a surprise, but we would like to see this happening at least in the future networks where configurations are better configured. And the classic downgrading attacks where IMSI catchers downgrade from higher generation to a lower generation network. We have shown this in the past that using unprotected mobility management messages, it's possible to send a mobile device or let's say downgrade a mobile device from higher generation to a lower generation. Of course, this is still possible in the 5G NSA networks, but the specification has already provided different solutions to avoid such attacks. For example, like there is an automatic timer-based recovery, but we haven't seen this implemented in several mobile phones or one of the most widely used mobile phones. There are several reasons for that, but if such mechanisms are not implemented, the device would stay in the no service mode and would require a manual restart or a flight mode toggling to actually obtain service back. There are several other mechanisms that have been demonstrated in the past how to actually downgrade the user from an LTE network to a 2G network by using RRC release messages. But the same is also possible in 5G NSA networks by using some sophistications. Of course, the downgrade attacks are still not completely gone. They would still be prevailing even in 5G NSA and SA networks as well. And coming to the capability exchange, our experiments in 2019 compared to 21 shows big difference because as you see here in 2019, the capabilities are actually exchanged prior to the security establishment, which actually allows a man in the middle to modify them and cause various DOS attacks. But now, due to the update in the configurations, we see that in all the 4 NSA networks that we tested, the capabilities are exchanged only after having a security session, which means there is a integrity protection which prevents a man in the middle to modify such capabilities. And the last one, the last feature that we have tested in the 5G NSA networks is that by now you might have understood in a 5G NSA configuration, it's the 4G base station that actually carry the control plane traffic. And after that, the 5G NR base station comes into place and carries the data traffic. But now, by using the integrity protection for the control plane or user plane, you can actually avoid the alter attack. So we try to understand what kind of configuration is provided over the 4G base station, and that could be used on a 5G base station. So here you see that there's a security configuration which is actually used when the mobile device connects to the 5G base station. As you see here, there is only the ciphering algorithm NEA2, which means new radio encryption algorithm. But there could also be optionally integrity protection algorithm which could have been specified. But in practice, in the 4 NSA networks, we don't see the integrity protection algorithm being used in this case, which actually makes the networks vulnerable to the Altaf attacks that have been demonstrated in the past. With this, I conclude the attacks on the NSA 5G NSA networks. From here on, Ravi would like to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Altaf. Now let's look at the 5G IMSI catchers and how they work in 5G standalone mode network only. So if the user is forcing mobile phone to be only on 5G standalone, what are the possibilities that they can be tracked? Let's look at first on decoding sushi. Now, if you have a sushi. Now, we already covered the part that sushi is encrypted, so it will not be exposed over there. So the user cannot be identified by based on sushi, or we call it equivalent of IMSI. But if the mobile phone is using sushi, so actually it is being protected, at least your sushi is protected. However, it reveals the home operator name. And if you remember the architecture of sushi, so it's a combination of MCC, that is a mobile country code, mobile network code MNC, and encrypted MSIN. So basically MCC and MNC are not encrypted, and there is a reason they are not encrypted for routing purpose. It may not be feasible to encrypt those MCC MNC at this stage in the 5G standardization procedure, but it should be possible to encrypt them and also enable routing as well. So hopefully we will see that in the next version, either in 6G or in the second or later phase of 5G standardization, it may be fixed, for example. So at least it will protect the home operator name as well, especially on something. And what is the impact of this? Basically, imagine that if you are running, if attacker is running an IMSI catchers near one essential building, maybe like let's say assume that the Black Hat conference room, for example, or maybe embassy, for example, so they can run the IMSI catcher there, which can decode all the sushi, and it can easily say that, okay, in this building particularly, or in the range of 300-meter area, we already see some of the users which are coming from Asia or Africa, for example. So you can easily differentiate between the people who are inside the building. So that reveals something, but not exactly your target. But there's still scope to decode some information there. Going forward, if the SUPI is not based on IMSI and the standard allows that your SUPI may have a different forms. For example, SUPI is equal to username at the realm. For example, it could be bob@nsa.com. It could be your email address, for example. And these scenarios are not maybe interesting for commercial mobile operators, but maybe 5G private network, that is the new types of a network, can be deployed in Industry 4.0 scenario, maybe for a factory purpose, maybe for military communication purpose, maybe for strategic communication purpose, maybe some airports also been deploying those private 5G networks. And it's easily able to distinguish between the private 5G network subscriber against the public 5G subscriber as well. And the reason is because the sushi, which may be derived from those SUPI, may not be random, especially the length, because the length will be different depending on the length of the username this has been used. And this was discovered by Ericsson Research, especially the John and Prajwal. And it could be the problem if it's not being fixed, for example. So if you are deciding to not use IMSI, then maybe you need to give this attention to this problem as well, that your 5G users will not be distinguishable from the other 5G subscribers. Then tracking with 5G ACA vulnerability, especially using ACA protocol, you need to be an active IMSI catcher here with the standalone networks. And the RAND and AUTN in 5G ACA protocol, I will come back to this later, but due to the limitation, we'll just focus to the points here. So the RAND and AUTN which are not being encrypted in ACA protocol, they can be easily sniffed or requested from the network if the target's IMSI is basically known, either by downgrading or other mechanisms. And again, this is targeted attack, not like a mass level of attack. And once the attacker knows RAND and AUTN, it is possible using an 5G base station, 5G standalone base station. You can replay those RAND and AUTN to the targeted mobile phone, and based on the response, you can usually identify. And they are basically exploiting the two vulnerabilities which we have been discovered in the past. The first one was from 2012, research works with University of Birmingham that we have been done in the past, and basically you can look at the MAC or sync failure in the ACA protocol and recognize whether this is your right target or not. And also the new vulnerability we discovered last year in 2019, in last year 2019 Black Hat talk, and this was about the XOR encryption mechanism that has been used in the AUTS that allows identification of a user as well as monitoring attacks. So this has been discussed in PET's 2018 or 2019 talk. And we haven't tried this vulnerability, at least in 5G standalone, but the researchers from University of Bochum, University of Bochum, Merlin, David, Christina, and Thorsten, they have released a paper actually, and they talk about, they verified this problem in 5G standalone as well, and that's pretty good effort from them as well. So this problem is still there because it hasn't been fixed in the 5G ACA protocol, at least the two vulnerabilities which we discovered. One is 2012 and 2019, but still this hasn't been addressed, for example. I will skip the 5G ACA protocol because this has been discussed in 2019 Black Hat talk, but just to give a significance that what you see here is that the sushi and also the RAND and AUTN which are being exchanged over the radio communication, this can be easily sniffed by the base station at the same time by using other means as well. So they are not being protected, so it can be used to exploit the vulnerabilities of AUTN. I skipped those 5G ACA protocol slides, but please feel free to read later, or you can listen to the 2019 Black Hat talk for the more details. Then another vulnerability is that 5G standalone networks, if your phone is there, it's possible to downgrade to 4G networks. Downgrading attack is still possible from active IMSI catches because the base station can still say that, okay, fine, this is a registration reject, we don't support 5G network services, then basically phone will drop to 4G network and downgrading attack works, and again you can bring on your 4G IMSI catcher attacks will be possible then. Again, downgrading to 3G or 2G may not be straightforward, but of course if you do some sophistication of attack, that may be possible at the same time. And even if the 5G standalone features which are proposed in the 5G security standard are being operational, are implemented in the 5G network devices, also core network devices. But if the operator who is deploying those networks are having some issues with their configuration, maybe they are not compliant with the mandatory features that has been suggested by the standardization bodies, then that may allow tracking of a user. And what we have witnessed so far with 5G non-standalone networks that we have been analyzed, I think they are missing most of the mandatory feature there. Not every operator, but some operators. So we have some deviations there. And if this will also be, if it's possible in 5G standalone, then we may have a problem again that IMSI catchers will be very easily they can be worked on 5G standalone network as well. There are some other open issues in 5G that we would like to also address, and the first is about the master-slave perspective. I think the 5G standard is definitely better than 4G, but still the architecture style between communication between the base station and the mobile phone device is base station still act as a master here. So it has a more power about security negotiations, like what network to choose or what not. So, and again, this problem may not be easy to solve, but I think still the way we are developing our networks, I believe that the more power, also equal power, should also be towards the mobile phones as well, not the higher power with base station as well. This may solve some of the issues as well with IMSI catchers being addressed, maybe, for example. Then we have still ACA protocol vulnerabilities that hasn't been fixed yet, and that needs to be addressed to prevent the targeted attacks of 5G IMSI catchers. Then we have a lack of ciphering indicator for data traffic, especially on the mobiles. We have seen in the past that in at least older generation until 3G, there used to be some mobile phones from Nokia or BlackBerry. They used to show you these lock symbols, for example. So when you make a phone call, the phone used to tell that your current mobile phone call is being encrypted or not. However, I mean, since 4G or 5G, we are using more data-oriented calls. I mean, your normal calls are going over data network. So I believe that even if we use data network, we need to have some kind of an indicator of whether the network traffic is encrypted or not, right? Now the 3GPP standard defines that those ciphering indicators should be provided per PDU sessions, either via APIs, for example. So there should be an API which gives all this ciphering indicator information to the upper layer, so that the mobile OS can show this to the user, for example, for their calls. However, the standard does not mandate how to use these APIs or ciphering indicators. So there should be a method to tell that how to mandate these APIs, for example. And also, when we look at the current smartphones, we have the 5G phones. Still, 5G phones do not show this mandatory ciphering indicator at all on our mobile phones. Either it has been implemented, but it may not be enabled or enforced. And of course, we know that the SIM card also, there is a bit in the SIM card that also allow enabling this ciphering indicator. So this has to be a coordination between the mobile operators and also the OEMs, for example, especially the smartphone OEMs, that they need to coordinate with mobile operator, and at least they should push the operator to have this feature to the user, because this will be the first level of at least the bottleneck for the IMSI catcher to be worked. So at least they can get an indicator, okay, why their call is suddenly not being encrypted now. So at least they get some kind of flag, for example, right? So this is good to have argument. And why I should give this argument, imagine that now the way we are shaming some web services, for example, if they are not providing HTTPS, people are shaming them, hey, why don't you provide HTTPS? And why your website is HTTP. So same argument, right? Now, if your network is already supporting encryption, I mean, there is no shame showing that whether it's encrypted or not. I mean, and then they should support, at least mobile operators should support or care about the privacy of mobile user. Then going back to downgrading, so it's still possible to downgrade to 4G network. Again, this problem may not be easy to solve in the standards, but not technically difficult at the same time. So maybe, and sadly, for users, it's difficult to remove 2G, because if they believe that they don't want to support 2G, they can just delete from their mobile phone, saying that, okay, I don't want my mobile phone to go on 2G. And this is really contradiction with mobile operators, saying that mobile operators say sometimes that, okay, fine, our network we cover 99% of the range to all over the country, for example, right? So why don't you also support 5G only mode, for example? And this is the next point. Basically, there is no clear guidelines for the OEMs, the choice of secure network selection. So users should get option actually to select the best secure network first, like 5G, not like an auto mode. Again, this is like a comfort for the user that they should not deny any network service. Auto mode is always good. But assuming that the city which you are living in have full 5G coverage, I mean, it makes sense to enable your phone on 5G network mode only, of course. And if you are not getting coverage, of course, you will see that you're not getting service. So user can change the network selection, for example. So at least having this option makes sense for the user. And again, not a single phone in the market we have been compiled among different vendors, 5G users. They don't give you any option to choose 5G only mode, or at least 5G non-standalone or standalone mode. So it's complete variation across the operators. You can see from iPhone 12 to Oppo, Reno, OnePlus, HT, Huawei, P40, Samsung. They have different completely variations. So there is no clear guidelines from the GSMA what the device vendor should do or implement these features, for example, at least also from mobile operators as well. And what could be the guidelines for operators for these IMSI catches? Again, so based on our experience with the variations of their network configurations, especially the RAN, the GUTI was always being problematic, because GUTI, if you don't really randomize or freshen your GUTI as per the standard, and if it's possible to link the target based on the GUTI in the traffic, I think there is a problem again. So the operator has to follow verification of RAN features suggested by the standard or GSMA in eNode B, also in the core network as well, and continuous monitoring of those RAN security features as well. For example, some networks not changing IMSI at all for 10 days, that's not a good sign. And this kind of a problem should be automatically detected rather than somebody third party. So there has to be some mechanism to automatically detect those deviations from the standard baseline. And then this should be required. And also a mechanism to detect IMSI catchers or bad devices as per the 3GPP standard. It could be good feature for the mobile operators that they could try to implement as well to protect the users against IMSI catchers. For OEM, again, the verification of RAN security features, and that's very important, especially from the baseband perspective. We have seen in the past the baseband has so much implementation issues, especially the mandatory feature of RAN security. First of all, IMEI should not be leaked in 4G network, or it should not be given to the user before the authentication. This was our work from 16. And also the EIA algorithm was being accepted even in non-emergency calls, for example. This is completely deviation from the standard, which was discovered by Benoit. There are various other issues as well. So there has to be verification of such features for important or critical security features that has been supported in 5G as well. So there has to be verification. And the mandatory ciphering indicator for all cellular network calls and also the data traffic. I mean, it should be implemented, and the vendors or OEMs should push the operators in coordination with to allow these features for the mobile users to be displayed, for example, because this could be the clear one of the feature for the mobile operators to see that whether the IMSI catcher is not giving encryption, or at least if it's being connected, for example. An option to choose the best secure network, it should be there, and I hope that the OEM should allow these features for mobile phone. Now, if you look at the IP40 mode, if you enable the developer mode on your mobile phone, actually it gives you extra option for user. It's saying that you can choose auto 5G mode or non-standalone or standalone non-standalone mode. But I mean, having either standalone mode is also been helpful for the user to stick to the best secure network available so far. So what are the takeaways? That definitely RAN security is improved in 5G, definitely. But however, the post-deployment security is always differing from the mandatory baseline. Yes, IMSI catcher attack is possible both in 5G standalone networks. But this IMSI catcher attack is targeted. It's not like a mask level. You can identify every user in the area. But again, once you know your target, targeted attack is possible. The 4G RAN security is almost similar to what we have in 5G standalone, currently deployed 90% of the mobile networks all over the world, especially 5G. So this gives false sense of 5G security because it's a 5G network, and that doesn't really say it's 5G non-standalone. So it's basically 5G non-standalone mode network, which is similar as a 4G. So it's not a same security level. We still have some unfixed radio protocols that hasn't been addressed in 5G security at all that allows targeted attacks, especially ACA or attached protocols. SUKI decoding still allows identification of roaming subscriber. That gives some hint, right? And for end users, there is no control over choosing the most secure network. So there is a variation. There has to be some guidelines for the vendors. And no security indicators for connected network either, for example, for a call or data traffic. So I believe that since 5G, we are more data-oriented traffic, there should be indication as well when you're using 5G data, most of the time that your data traffic is being secured. Of course, we have application level security, but it makes sense to have a layered security, and we should know that what kind of security at each layer, for example, right? This could be a good indicator. And also lack of enforcement of security features in operational networks allow tracking of 5G users easily, and that we have seen in 5G non-standalone network that we have been analyzed. Most of the operators are actually lacking some mandatory features to be enabled there. And we suggest that we need a continuous or proactive security monitoring of these 5G RAN configurations going in the future. And there is a scope for development. So definitely, yes, we are improving, but at the same time, it's still possible to do some IMSI catcher attack in 5G non-standalone and standalone networks. So thank you for listening. And we hope to convey our summary. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us email, or we can have a question and answer in the chat session. Thank you very much.